Or
Good evening and welcome to the Grace Talk. If you're watching us today on Facebook or YouTube, or if you're listening to us on Vital GH Radio, we would like to welcome you to our show. Today we will continue our September to Remember Business Show series with Tom Shaw. We are bringing you the story of Tom Shaw. Tom is an amazing leader who started out his work life as a mechanic and ended up as a chief executive officer of a Fortune 500 company. In addition, Tom has raised tremendous leaders who have gone on to excel in corporate America. Well, here to tell you how he did it is my guest, Tom Shaw.
Thank you, Gloria.
Tom, welcome to our show.
I appreciate the opportunity.
So Tom, I am excited. I know your story and it continues to inspire and challenge me every day that I think about it, which is why I wanted to bring it to our audience today. So tell us about yourself from the beginning. Tell us about Tom Shaw.
Okay. Well, my father was a senior heavy equipment mechanic working in coal mining and heavy construction. We moved around a lot when I was a kid. I was born in western central Pennsylvania. We lived there for a little while. Then moved to West Virginia, then eastern Pennsylvania, then New Jersey, both east and west, then northern Delaware, and then back to west central PA by the time I was 10. I got used to meeting people and being adaptive to different environments. I was in 3 different school systems in 2 different states in first grade. We moved back to Delaware when I was in 10th grade, and I graduated from high school here. No one in my immediate family had gone to college, but my dad told me I needed to do that. Since I wasn't sure I wanted to do 4 years of college, I looked into going into a 2-year school first. There was none in Delaware at the time. I ended up going to Salem Technical and Community College just over the Delaware Memorial Bridge in New Jersey. I had started working at a gas station, pumping gas and working as a mechanic when I was in high school, and continued to do that while I was at Salem Tech. I had also started dating my wife-to-be, and we were married after I graduated from Salem Tech, and we're still married after 51 years.
I'm going to stop right there and say, Sandy, if you're watching us today, thank you for being the rock behind Tom all these years. 51 years of marriage and still going strong. You guys are an inspiration, and your marriage is such a beautiful thing to behold. I've seen you guys in private settings and also in public settings, and I'm telling you, your marriage and your relationship is an inspiration. Thank you so much. So Tom, there you are, 16 years old, a mechanic, right? And now you go to college, 2-year college, and you continue to work as a mechanic. So how did you go from there to becoming a CEO?
Well, basically, I graduated from Salem and got married in 1967. And as some may remember, the military draft was still in effect at that time, as was the Vietnam War underway. I had a draft deferment while I was attending Salem Tech, but that expired when I graduated. The protocol was to go to the Selective Service Office and register again, and I did that and was handed my draft notice that same day. I ended up enlisting in the Army, and if you enlisted, you were given 3 choices of military occupational specialty, as it was known, and you were guaranteed to get one of the 3 choices. The Army decided which of the 3. I chose the Corps of Engineers, the Signal Corps, or Heavy Equipment Mechanic. So naturally, I was assigned to be a heavy equipment mechanic.
So mechanic at 16, now you're in the military.
Correct.
And you're a mechanic in the military.
That is
so
correct.
Continue to tell us the story. How did you go from there to becoming CEO of Atlantic City Electric and Delmarva Power?
Okay. Well, I went to Fort Bragg for basic training, Aberdeen Proving Grounds in Maryland, for my advanced training as a mechanic. The usual assignment locations after that training was either somewhere in the U.S. or somewhere in Europe, or at the time, Vietnam. Naturally, I was sent to Vietnam. I landed in Cam Ranh Bay on my 21st birthday. Most people remember their 21st birthday. I kind of try to forget mine. I was assigned as part of a crew on a tracked recovery vehicle, which is basically a very large tank, but instead of a turret and a cannon, it has a boom and a blade, and it's used to recover, tow, and salvage other military vehicles. We traveled with the troops being transported in armored personnel carriers. We made emergency repairs and recovery as necessary. If under fire and unable to recover a specific vehicle, there were times we would actually blow it up. I was promoted to sergeant while in Vietnam, and fortunately was back in the States within a couple days of my 22nd birthday. My next assignment was at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and my wife was able to go with me. We figured we'd be there for the rest of my enlistment, approximately 16 months. Didn't work out that way. I got orders to go to Germany after being at Fort Knox for just 7 months. I could only take my wife to Germany with me if I had at least a year left. That meant I would have had to re-up and extend my enlistment. We discussed that and both decided against it. So I went to Germany by myself. But I did find out that I could get an early discharge if I went back to college. So thanks to my wife and mother doing some research and the fact that Delaware Technical and Community College had opened in Delaware in the meantime, I got out 3 months early and went back to college to get a second 2-year degree. I was able to get credit for a number of my courses from Salem Tech and graduated from Del Tech within a year. I was very fortunate that an executive from Delmarva Power was on the Del Tech advisory committee and looking to hire some graduates from Del Tech for technical positions at Delmarva. 2 of my main instructors recommended me, and I was hired as an engineering technician at Delmarva's Edgemore plant in July of 1971. Although the job had a lot of mechanical aspects to it, it was my first job where I wasn't a mechanic. My superiors at the time were very supportive, and after I was there for a while, recommended that I go back to college to get my bachelor's degree. Again, I was fortunate, as Wilmington College had opened by then and was specializing in students that were working. I was able to have a number of credits from my previous colleges accepted and graduated with my bachelor's degree in 1974. My graduation was accompanied by a promotion at work, and that facilitated the start of my climb up the organization at the Edgemore Power Plant. I was actually promoted to the top position there, plant superintendent, in 1976. I was still in my 20s. In late 79, I was asked to take the position of manager of internal auditing, corporate productivity, and corporate security. It was obviously a training opportunity for me because it didn't have the technical aspects to it. It was all business. And since it was the company chairman and CEO that asked me and that I would report to, I didn't hesitate to take it.
Tom, we're getting some feedback from our audience that they're not hearing the audio. So we'll ask our team to check on the audio and make sure that the audio is high enough for get our audience to hear. So now, Tom, let's go back. Okay, you have gone through 2-year college. You went back and got another 2-year college,
Right.
and now you've been hired at Delmarva.
That's correct.
For your first so we're seeing the transition from mechanic. Now you had your first non-mechanic job.
That's
But
right.
again, obviously, a generation, which is where you were, the plant has a lot of mechanical parts.
It does.
But it's not a strictly mechanic position.
That's
So
right.
you're making the transition.
Correct.
So tell us again, what are the additional steps that took you to become the Chief Executive Officer?
Okay, well, as I mentioned, I was promoted to the plant superintendent in '76, and then to the other job of the manager of internal auditing, productivity, and corporate security. That gave me a broad overview of all the company. I was in that job for about 2 years, and then in 1981, I was promoted to general manager of all of production for Delmarva. Basically, all of Delmarva's plant superintendents reported to me. In the mid-1980s, with the same basic responsibilities, I was promoted to vice president. So I was then a corporate officer. Starting in late '89 and continuing in the early '90s, I was given various opportunities to run other segments of Delmarva's businesses. They included the gas division, which provided natural gas delivery and services to northern Delaware. Also, there was Delmarva Capital Investments, which included unregulated businesses, and they were things like unregulated generation, waste management and disposal. We actually owned a trash collecting company up in Pennsylvania. Leveraged leases, real estate holdings, and commercial sales. In 1992, I was promoted to senior VP with responsibility for all utility operations, including power generation, customer service, utility services, all the line crews, transmission crews, as well as unregulated businesses. In 1997, I was promoted to executive VP of Connective, as we had just merged with Atlantic City to form Connective. In 2000, I was promoted to president and chief operating officer of Connective, with responsibility for all company operations at Connective. In 2002, I became the executive vice president of Pepco Holdings and continued as president of Connective as we merged with Pepco. Then in 2005, I was executive vice president and chief operating officer of Pepco Holdings and became CEO of Atlantic City Electric, Delmarva Power, and Pepco, all the utilities.
What a journey. This is a remarkable journey. From a mechanic, 2-year college. And it's very important to bring this out because sometimes today, people look down or do not appreciate the value of a 2-year college. You went to a 2-year college and you have progressed in your career from a mechanic to where you are now the chief executive officer of the Fortune 500 company. That's a remarkable story. Now, you kept saying I was promoted. I'm going to drill down, Tom, because it doesn't just happen. So talk to me, and I know you're very modest. You've talked to me privately, and you've said things like, I was fortunate to be promoted. People took an interest in me. While that is true, your growth is not attributable to luck. Talk to us about your work ethic.
Well, I learned this early on, even as a kid moving around. It pays to have people skills. When you move around a lot and you're in a lot of different schools, you have to adapt and become friends with a lot of different people. And I think that experience, although it was tough doing it at the time, was helpful in that regard. I think the other thing that's very important is not just meeting people, but listening. You think you learn, and I did learn a lot by going to school, and most people do. and they become more intelligent and more knowledgeable. But it's also very important to listen, because I've learned this many times, you don't know everything.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody does.
That's right.
And particularly when you're running a large organization, there's aspects of it that I'm sure not every boss knows about. So he or she has to depend on some of the organization around him to give him input and help him make the proper decision. And learning that, I think, was one of the key things that helped me develop. It helped me get along with a lot of my coworkers. It helped me get further along in the organization by doing things in what turned out to be the right way. Not all the time, but most of the time. And I think that was a big part of my advancement.
Now, I'm gonna, break this down for our audience. What Tom is saying, in my view, is one of the most important things to arrive at any executive leadership role. By the time you've gone to any level of management in a company, your technical skills are already validated.
Correct.
Everyone knows that you have the technical skills.
That's correct.
And everyone else at that level have the technical skills.
Usually. Yes.
Usually. The only way that you can differentiate yourself is to have the interpersonal skills that he is talking about, because that is what would elevate you from being just another good engineer or another good mechanic or another good lawyer to executive leadership. Your ability to manage people, your ability to interface with people, to relate with people, is one of the key leadership qualities that's going to elevate you. That's what he's talking about, interpersonal skills. He learned it the hard way, bouncing from one place to the other with your parents moving. But he's mentoring you now to let you know, learn to deal with people. Because everywhere you go, there are people.
Exactly. That's who you work with.
That's who you work with. And if you're looking to rise in any organization, you have to be able to work with people. Tom, I have another question for you.
Sure.
You had mentioned one of the things that struck me as you were describing your growth is just the broad, experience that you have. You started out, at the plant, but then you began to have all kinds of experiences, even managing things like trash businesses. Talk to us about how important is that, having a broad-based experience to get into executive leadership roles?
Again, I think it's pretty important because it gives you different perspectives. It helps you learn how to deal with situations that you might not otherwise encounter if you stayed in the same place or even just moved a little bit. Having the experience, we mentioned the trash business. That was really the side effect of deregulation of generation. And back in the early 90s, companies started to build power plants that were unregulated, and one of the ways they fueled them was from trash. That was an example. The fellow that ran that part of the business before me had gotten into this business without really knowing a whole lot about it. So one of the things I had to do was learn a lot about it, and eventually we were able to sell it at a profit. Mm-hmm. But it took several years, so we had to run it, and it had to be run well to be able to sell it for a profit.
But eventually you took out the trash.
That's right. I still do that occasionally.
Sandy, thank you for putting him to work, taking out the trash. Okay. Now, Joe Rigby was here last week.
Okay.
And one of the things that he mentioned, he got a question from the audience about mentoring and who were his mentors. And he said, he mentioned one name, and that was your name.
Really?
He said, Tom Shaw took an interest in me and mentored me. Talk to us about mentoring and the role that can play in growth into executive leadership.
Well, one of the responsibilities that any executive has or should have is the development of subordinates, so that he has qualified replacements for himself and potentially other executives as well. And one of the main aspects of doing that is by mentoring. In essence, counseling and giving them advice on various things that they have to make decisions on, or activities that they have underway that maybe they should look at changing how they're being done or things of that nature. So mentoring is obviously one of the people skills that's very important, and having somebody, having had somebody do that for me, and it was more than just one person, I recognized the value of it, and I tried to do it for those that reported to me.
So your advice to anyone looking to grow is find good mentors. What would be your qualifications for what a good mentor is?
Well, I mean, it's true that they should look for good mentors, and finding them can be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really somebody that's willing to share the benefit of their experience and knowledge with you, and not just the technical aspects of it, but the personal aspects of it, the people skills, again, come into play. That's what I would say.
Okay, so look for someone who is interested in you and who wants to invest in you
That's
and
correct.
share their experience with you. Now, let me ask you, you mentioned as well transitioning into different roles. It was just amazing, the growth and the progression that you had. Did you have to volunteer for some of those, or were you always tapped on the shoulder to do them? How did you come about those roles?
It was both, actually. In some cases, for instance, when I went to the manager of internal auditing and corporate security and so on, I was actually requested to do that by the current chairman and CEO at the time. He was also an engineer who had started out in a power plant. So he had heard a little bit about me and wanted to give somebody that had similar background like him an opportunity to gain additional experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the one where I was asked about it. Another one was later on in my career, I had been in the same position for 8 years. Now, for me, that was a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to my boss at the time and said, you know, I'm not dissatisfied. I like my job. I think I'm doing well at it, and I could continue to do that. But I'd also like some other experience. So if there's some other opportunities that you think I could help the company with, and it would be good for the company and for me to learn, I'd appreciate having an opportunity to do that. 2 weeks later, he came back and offered me another job.
Now, did you hear that? Because what I'm hearing is that you took initiative
Correct.
to say, I want more opportunity, I want a challenge. Now, talk to me about that. Did that go, obviously it went over well, because the next 2 weeks you got a different assignment.
Correct.
So if you're listening to us today and you're looking for an opportunity, maybe you've been in a role for 8 years like Tom, or maybe shorter, because today younger people do not want to stay 8 years in a role. You know, but if you've been there for a while and you want a change, you want a challenge, it actually might be a good thing, Tom is saying, to go talk to your supervisor, to let them know you're ready for a new assignment, that you want a challenge. But make sure you're doing your current job well.
Exactly. That's a very important point.
And I don't know if you want to add there, because if you're not doing your current job well and you go and say, well, I want a promotion, they're going to say you leave, get out the door.
Yeah.
You're not doing well.
That's quite likely a possibility. Yeah.
Another thing I want you to talk about is obviously if you go to a supervisor and say, I want a job, I want a promotion. If you have a supervisor who is not secure, that might be a problem as well. He might think you're looking for his job.
That's correct.
So talk to us about that.
Well, it's important to know your supervisor in a number of ways, not just what he's responsible for and what he or she expects you to do, but to get a sense of their personality and how secure they are in their own job and what other interests they may have. Some may appreciate that you're interested in their job. Others would be threatened by it. So kind of knowing the personality that you're dealing with is important there. And again, people skills come into play. They're very important.
Okay, we're going to tune into our audience for some questions. You already have questions for you waiting, Tom.
Okay.
And the first one is, what advice would you give to those looking to change or to pivot their careers?
Well, first, know what you want to change or pivot to, and make sure that you would be comfortable and qualified to do that. And if you're comfortable with both those aspects, then you should pursue, opportunities that would give you that type of job, whether it's asking your current supervisor, interviewing for other jobs, talking to other people that have similar jobs. All of that could be helpful.
There you go. So if you're looking to make a change, begin first by getting yourself ready. That's what Tom is saying.
Exactly.
Make sure that you are ready, you're qualified for what you're looking for, and that you prepare yourself. And sometimes if you don't have the skill sets, you might go back to school
Exactly.
to acquire the skills for the area that you're looking to transition into. But make sure that you're ready before going out there and looking for that opportunity.
Sure. One more point. This applies to this situation, but others too. It's always good to be your own worst critic. Make sure you know your weaknesses as well as your strengths.
Oh, by the way, I'm going to share with you something that I learned from a mentee of Tom. From Joe Rigby had shared with me. If you have a developmental area, make sure you address it. Don't allow it to become a derailer.
That's right.
If you have a developmental area, take ownership of that, take charge of it, and go and grow in that area. And because if you don't address it over time, it's going to become something that could derail your career. Okay, another question for you from the audience.
Sure.
What advice would you give to those looking to further their careers via advanced education or continuing in the workforce?
Well, advanced education is usually a very good thing, but you need to make sure that the education that you get is focused on something that, one, you're interested in, and two, will help your career. Sometimes just taking advanced education, it's not a bad thing, but it doesn't necessarily help your current situation. So make sure it's something that will be a definite help to your career.
So if you're looking for advanced education, make sure it's something that's relevant
Correct.
to the role that you want. That's what Tom is saying. You have to, any advanced education just won't do. It has to be something that lines up with where you want to go. But Tom, let me drill down a little bit. Sure. Because I've seen a situation where someone goes to get advanced education, and they come back to the company and they automatically expect to be promoted. And it's caused a lot of, just unrealized expectations and sometimes bitterness with the company because they thought, oh, I went and got this degree and I worked so hard. Now you give me something for it. Right. And, when that doesn't, materialize, it's problematic. Talk to us about that.
Well, the word you used a minute or so ago, relevant. Relevant and relevance are very important. So you need to make sure when you're taking advanced education that it is in fact relevant to something that is within your career path or the path that you want to pursue in your next career. So relevance is extremely important.
It's important. Okay, you have another question, and that is, how did you learn to delegate as your career advanced?
Well, it was one of the things that I learned in a couple different ways. As a mechanic, you're used to basically doing pretty much everything yourself. But as I progressed beyond mechanic and learned to do other things, as I mentioned, I believe I became a sergeant while I was in the Army. So I was basically a motor sergeant, they call them. And that taught me that I had to delegate to others what I used to do all myself. So that was the start of the learning experience. Then after I was in the service and had gotten at Delmarva, I was given a number of opportunities even before I was promoted to run various jobs. So I had to supervise various people and delegate responsibilities. So I took that under my wing and kind of said, let's see, this worked well, that didn't. So you learn from that, and that was a big part of my experience to get to be a supervisor and then a manager and eventually an executive.
Thank you for saying that. I do have a question because in my experience as well, I have run into some executives who are type A personalities. They do very well and they get things done. They're kind of, they go-getters and they get things done. And they have a tendency to want to rely only on themselves Or if they delegate to someone, they have to do it exactly like they would do it.
Right.
And if they can't do it exactly like me or you, and then they feel frustrated. Talk to us about that. You know, what level is it? Is 80%, 90%? What is the acceptable level where you can back off? And you also have others who delegate and then they micromanage.
That's right.
Those that they delegated to. So talk to us about delegation. That's a big area.
Sure.
If you're going to be in leadership, you're not going to know everything.
That's
You're
true.
going to have to delegate. How do you do it well?
Well, you mentioned type A personalities, and I think most of us have run into somebody like that. And what usually happens is either they or the person they're supervising gets very frustrated and has problems. And one of the best ways of avoiding those type problems is to learn how to delegate. And part of that is, again, people skills. Knowing the people, knowing that you can delegate certain things to them, not everything, but you can delegate certain things to them, and they will accomplish that in a way that you're comfortable with and achieve the objectives that are needed to be successful. So again, it's people skills and knowing the people, and if you don't know them, being willing to learn about them, and in some cases, learn with them. You may have to delegate something to them that you're not comfortable they know everything about, but you can help them learn, and you learn as you're going along.
No, absolutely, delegation is a key area as a leader because your success eventually will depend on those that you delegate to.
That's correct.
And how good they are.
That's correct.
I read a book that said you have to read people before you can lead people.
That's a good saying.
That's a good saying. I took that home. You have to read people to lead them. So knowing who the members of your team,
Correct.
knowing their strengths
Exactly.
and their weaknesses,
Yes.
and what you can delegate to them is very important. And then obviously, I am a big believer in not micromanaging people.
That's right.
Hire the right people. That's very
Hire
important.
and promote the right people.
Promote the right people, hire the right people, promote the right people, and then empower them to do their jobs.
That's correct.
And the tendency sometimes is for you to jump in and to figure it out, but you need to step away and let them excel. Because when you step in as a leader, you basically deny them of the role, the opportunity to show what they can do.
But they don't learn as much when you do that.
They don't learn as much, and everyone suffers, and they're frustrated. So thank you, Tom. This is absolutely fantastic. And if you joined us right now, we are just wrapping up our conversation with Tom Shaw, who started out as a mechanic, 2-year degree mechanic. And by the time he ended his career, he was a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And Tom has spoken to us today on he talked to us about work ethic. He talked to us just now about delegation, interpersonal skills, and mentoring. These are all skills that you need to learn if you're going to grow in your executive leadership or in any leadership role.
That's correct.
You need these skills to grow. Now, Tom, I don't know if you have any takeaways, any comments before we end the show today. What would be your if someone on the other side of that camera listening to you, what would be your takeaways for them?
Well, it's very important to have knowledge, experience, and expertise of every nature that you can get about your job, but it's equally important to have people skills and to use them not only with the people that you work with, but think about what you're doing and how you can do things better as a person. That's my advice.
Thank you. And I do have a question now. As you were speaking, I recalled something that came up last week when Joe Rigby was here. He mentioned that some of the roles that he was offered, was not a natural thing that he would have wanted. But that sometimes he had to take a risk.
That's right.
To take an opportunity that was offered to him. Talk to us about that. Because sometimes, particularly women, and I'm speaking as a woman, a female executive, women sometimes want to know 100% of the area before they take the role. And so they kind of short circuit their own success. Talk to us about that.
Well, every job has its risks, and some of those depend on the type of job it is, the specifics around the job. But whenever you take a new job, that in itself is a risk. So just be aware that to advance, to get to the job that you would like to have or want to have, there's going to be some risk. You have to accept those and manage them, and that's not unusual. Just be very careful, make sure you do your best to understand the risk and to manage them, and you'll do fine.
So if you have an opportunity that's coming down your way, don't let your fear stop you from it.
That's correct.
Don't talk yourself out of it. Do not shoot yourself in the foot. Do not negotiate against yourself. If someone has the confidence to think that you can do a job, you should go back and say, maybe I can.
That's right.
And then you do whatever you need to do. You learn. You may not, many times I've been in roles where I didn't know everything I needed to know for that role. But if you will apply yourself, you go and learn and read. And the good thing is with the internet, you have so many resources
Exactly.
at your fingertips. So do not let the fact that you don't feel qualified stop you from an opportunity. Take advantage of it. Go and research. Grow yourself. At a minimum, you will grow yourself. And then also you can excel in that role. We have come to the end of our conversation with Tom Shaw today. What an amazing wealth of information and growth. And I am still learning from Tom. And I've been an executive for many years, but I'm still learning, listening to him sitting here today. And Tom, first of all, I want to say thank you for your service to our country.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for
welcome.
serving in the military, for serving in Vietnam. And thank you for being such an inspirational leader to me and to many others. It's not just what you've done with your own career, but I know many other people that you've influenced in their careers. Joe was one last week, and next week we're going to have another gentleman on this show who you influenced as well. So thank you so much for your leadership, and thank you for the legacy that you've left for us. If you're joining us today, this is the Grace Talk. We have been talking with Tom Shaw, Chief Executive Officer. Okay, I thought we got a question from our audience, but we're out of time. We cannot take any more questions. Everyone, thank you for joining our show today. Good night, and God bless you.